I do this with marketing, my own business as well. You assume a lot of things and you don't really explain them very well. All marketing is relationship building at scale. So I always say start with the obvious practical things. So money, time, effort. Still the most effective form of marketing is word of mouth. And there's two ways to break a pattern. There's so much complexity. The only answer, the only solution is to start small, start simple, and don't think of it as marketing, just think of it as relationship building.
Marketing could seem like a lot, but Alex has just managed to simplify it down to a couple of core ideas. He said that marketing at its core is about building relationships. We covered that. We also covered things like how to reach out to people, how to build up your persona, and also how to simplify the message. If you're interested in that, this episode is for you. Now, check out Alex's intro.
So I'm Alex, I'm a freelance marketing consultant. I work with founders and I run through all their marketing with them. So focusing on strategy, working out what they need, and then putting a plan together to make it happen for them. That's me.
Wow, that's really cool, Alex, working with founders. We'll get into that.
Yes.
Absolutely. So that was a small intro you gave us. So tell us a bit more about your sort of like day-to-day job and how that looks like.
It's very variable. So marketing is so vast, it's so broad, so it could be anything, but it's project based what I do. So sometimes I'm not working, other times I am. Sometimes it's, 2-week project, otherwise it's a 6-month project. Could be anything, a lot of networking, referrals. I do a lot of free stuff as well. And a lot of it begins like this, just with a conversation. So it could be in person if they're local, or a lot of it online and just speaking to founders, understanding what their business is, what their struggles are, what they're trying to do with the business, and getting a feel for it. Because I think when you're a founder, you have so much passion, you have all these ideas, you've got all this knowledge, but often that's the thing that stops you on a marketing side as well, because you're too close to it. There's loads of free advice out there, too much. It's hard to know what to listen to, what to ignore, where you should focus on first, and how you actually build things up. And I think as well, like when you're a founder, you have to be all over the business. So you have to do the sales, the marketing, product development if it's a product-based business, distribution, just absolutely everything, customer service. So you need help. And I kind of work with people who have got the ideas, they've got the passion, they have small teams, or they're doing it all themselves and they just try and either do bits for them or make it easy. So one day I could be writing LinkedIn posts, another day I could be creating email sequences, or I could be discussing strategy and then pulling all these things together, creating messaging documents, working through their brand, anything like that, customer insight, competitor analysis, all of these things. So I started kind of with copywriting, like actually writing the words, blogs, all of this stuff. And yeah, quickly realizing, as you do when you're copywriting, it's what's behind that. Like, yes, you can produce all this content, but what's tying it all together? What picture are you building? Where's it all leading and how it fits together? So that kind of like naturally led me into strategy, which I enjoy more. But yeah, I kind of do a mix of lots of different things.
So marketing is quite big, and as you saw from like the list of questions I originally sent you,
Yeah.
there was like loads of sort of like categories that I put questions around market discovery, customer insights, product development, go-to markets, customer acquisition, obviously retention, growth, and all that kind of stuff. So how could you, I would like some help breaking it down to how you would break it down with, say, a founder that doesn't know that much about marketing. And I'm saying that because I find myself in a position where obviously I've got a podcast and I'm not fully focused on marketing for that matter. And I know I should be, for example, because different books, different articles, different podcasts, they tell you that yes, you might have a product, you might have an idea, and you should absolutely spend your time developing the idea or that product, but 50% of the time you should also put into marketing, because if you don't have the marketing
Yeah.
right, then how are you going to sell your product or service or whatever that is?
Yeah.
So like take me from like the beginning of how you would talk with a founder who doesn't have really an idea
The
of their
marketing knowledge.
marketing.
Like you say, it's so big, and I think that's a big problem because each area, like we go into brand, you go into growth, product, like performance marketing, product marketing, conversion rate optimization. Each area is its own specialist thing, and it does become overwhelming. So I always start by simplifying it and actually thinking that marketing is really, it fits so neatly into what a business is doing anyway. It's how do you fulfill a need, an unmet need for a specific customer. So I try and like just break it down of, okay, what problem are you solving and who needs that problem solved? And then you kind of break it into like simple language, conversational language. I try and avoid as much jargon as possible and just get people like founders talking about their business, how the opportunity came, why they're doing it. And there are, like you say, there's so many books, there's so much advice. You go on online, social media. There's so many people offering their services their particular way, and I've been down that route, and I've created playbooks, and it's got to be right this thing first, and then you go into this and this. I don't do that anymore. I just start with a normal conversation of just tell me about your business in your own words and see what they come up with. And then I know I've been in marketing sort of 10 years across lots of different things. So I know the questions to ask as a copywriter as well. I think a lot of it comes from that because you have to have the information that you need. So if I'm writing about a complex financial product, for example, I don't know anything about that. So I can't just blag it. I have to find out that information. And it's really useful, like when you have a business, I do this with marketing, my own business as well. You assume a lot of things and you don't really explain them very well. And you think it's clear because it's in your head. But when you have to actually talk about it, especially when you have to write about it and market it, it's a completely different proposition because suddenly you're thinking, how do I explain this? And what do I mean about this thing? And why is this important? And how is it better than what is already available out there? So I really avoid the complexity, and there's a lot of complexity, and just try and break it down as simple as possible. And the way I've kind of come to understand that is right. There's a specific customer with a specific problem, and you've got a specific solution, and it's kind of just starting with that very basic high level view and then drilling down into it and really holding them to account. So being like, okay, well, if they say, well, it's a new coffee brand, okay, well, why, coffee roaster, for example. So what's unique about that? What's special about that? There's so much coffee available. So what's different about this thing? And just going in, and getting them to explain it. And then you quickly hit the roadblocks. So if they think, I don't know, I'm not sure, then okay, well, that's where we need to drill in. And that could be like looking at competitors. So who are your closest competitors? How do they talk about this problem? What are they saying about their product? How are they positioning themselves as different? And then you find the gaps, and then you're like, okay, this is, does this fit that kind of product market fit you might have heard before of like, okay, well, this is what we've got. And when we talk about product as well, I talk about it could be a service. It doesn't have to be a physical product. So, okay, this is what it is. This is what it does. Break it down, all the elements. Where's it fitting in the market? So that's a customer specific group with a specific need that's related to that problem. Like, where does it fit in? And the idea is you don't offer the same as everyone else because you get into that competitiveness of having to try and beat people on price, or the other way is you're trying to become the biggest brand, the most well known. You can do that, but you're going to come up against someone who's got bigger resources than you do. So that's where the strategy piece comes in of like, well, we have to be clever about this. We can't do the same, offer the same, say the same things as everyone else.
So you try to simplify you try to simplify the wording around what they do and break it down in such a way that it starts from the beginning with, okay, you've given the example of coffee roasters. What are you trying? What's the problem you're trying to solve for that customer, and work from there.
Yeah.
So, what other questions do you ask in that in those like early days?
I always like to get a feel for the founder first, like their story, because it's often the easiest thing to talk about. We were talking off air before we started this. I was asking you about how you started your podcast, and the information just comes out, right? Because it's your story, and so it's like, oh yeah, I always loved coffee and traveled around South America, and when I was in Colombia, I visited a few plantations and learnt a little bit about the different coffee beans, and it's really interesting. And then just got hooked on coffee, and I was going to all these cafes, and so that story emerges, and you start to pick things out, often by how much information the founder can talk about, like how much they have and how much it means to them. Like just clearly, like you can tell when someone's like passionate and animated, and you go, okay, well, there's something here. And then all I'm really doing, it's an interview. All I'm doing is, okay, what was special about that experience in Colombia, or what was unique, or when you go to coffee and you try a coffee, like what's the difference in taste, like what are you picking up on all these things. And it's just information gathering, and that's often the hardest thing with anything. Like there is so much information available, but first of all, the first task is get the information and then lay it out. And I think with copywriting, with marketing, I try and put it into a clear narrative, like a basic, simple, you can put it into a pitch structure, but you need a very simple, ideally 1 paragraph, 1 page max way of describing what the business is, what it is, what it does, how it came about, the reason behind it, find your why, Simon Sinek kind of, the purpose behind it, the passion. And then really nailing those points. So saying, well, this is what it is, this is what it does, this is why it started, and this is who it's for and why they need it. And through that, you're looking at, well, what is the gap that you feel? Like, what is the unmet need? So you also have to talk about the competition, because you can't just talk about yourself or the customer in isolation. It's not just you. So there are all these other businesses offering the same or very similar things. What's different about your thing? How are you the same? Because it has to be familiar to people so they understand what it is straight away. But also then, what are those differences? And it's just pulling out all that information through conversation, and then I can separately put it into different frameworks. Again, there are so many different frameworks.
Let me stop you right there.
Yeah.
So, would you like to run through like an example with the podcast? Because you already asked me the question earlier,
Yeah.
and I can re-give the answer. So, the reason for you asked me why I wanted to start a podcast, and so like the story behind it. And long story short, to say it again on the camera as well, is a while ago I was listening to loads of podcasts, and one of them was Stephen Bartlett's Diary of a CEO. And as people obviously know for sure, is that his podcast, he invites guests who are high-level figures, CEOs, executives, PhD people who have got loads of knowledge, or who are perceived to have loads of knowledge, and who are perceived to have high-value, I guess, information that they could spread out to the masses. And that's why people watch those types of shows. And I was thinking, well, I'm listening to loads of podcasts. I like that. That's Diary of a CEO is a good example. What would I do different about mine? Back then in 2024, I thought, well, if I was to do a podcast, I think I would do it about, well, everyone, not just, say, for example, I don't know, Elon Musk. Yeah, for sure he's smart, but who's to say that you and I, Alex, don't have the same amount of value to offer to people, because we've lived through different experiences, and we can offer that value to people through those lived experiences. So that was the idea of the podcast, of like putting any sort of person on the spot and enabling them to give that value to the others. That's how it started. And the last couple of episodes I've done, I've sort of like tried to focus a bit more, because it's quite hard to take a random person from the streets, put them in a chair, ask them a bunch of questions, a bunch of questions that will put them in a position to give value. That's quite hard, I realized at some point. And I was like, well, what's the next best thing? And with you, for example, you're really good at marketing, so let's talk about marketing. I had a very cool person on the podcast the other day, and she's doing a bunch of tour guides here in Bath. And her one thing that I was really fascinated by was how she was telling stories. So the whole episode was about storytelling. And that still takes the average person, puts them in a position where they can give value. But recently I've been trying to focus on, well, what's that one skill they have that they could talk about. So that's that.
Yeah. So I guess like with your podcast idea as well and that inspiration, so it's a really interesting story and route in. So did you think of it as something this would be cool to do because I'm not seeing anyone else do that, or I think this could be a commercial opportunity, like this could grow into something like what was
There were
what was
two
behind
reasons behind it. None of them were commercial, really. One of them was it would be a cool thing to do. And the second one, it was back then, because I had finished university, all my friends were about to go in different places to live. So like London, for example, most of my friends are in London. And I wouldn't have any other friends here in Bath, or the number of friends I have or had back then was really small because everyone left. So I was sort of like trying to like meet new people through a podcast. So number one was good, it's a cool idea, and number two was see if I could meet new people.
Yeah. Okay. Both good ideas. So has that changed, or is that still the main reason?
There's a third reason now. I still want to meet new people. I still think it's a cool idea. The third reason is in order to sort of like maximize meet cool people and sort of like think a bit about, well, how could I make it a bit more commercial? Is, well, why if I met loads of people through the podcast, invited them. I sent you a message the other day, right, about do you want to come to a cocktail party? Well, I didn't call it a cocktail party. I called it a party. Every person I invite on the podcast, I try to invite them now to a sort of like party here in Bath, where they get to meet with other people who've been on the podcast or who are small local business owners. And I try to see if I can connect those people and expand that reason of meeting new people, but also see if I could maybe, I don't know, because when you talk with people, ideas come up and you might think, oh, that would be a cool thing to do, and maybe it goes into like something commercial. So yeah, there's a third reason.
So the commercial opportunity isn't necessarily what this podcast could become. This podcast is one avenue for creating a network, for creating a community, and then you never know what would come out of that community.
Yeah, and obviously I could sit here and tell you, well, it would be a stupid thing not to think about the fact that, well, could this be something commercial? Because you see all these podcasts nowadays that they make money off of ads, or they make money off of like episodes, or they make money off their short form content, and it would be stupid not to think about it. I'm not too intentional about it though. I do post like short form content on Instagram, TikTok, and all the platforms, but they don't have that many views as I guess popular ones. But that's okay. Not ruling it out, but also not fully focusing on that either.
Well, I think so. You hit on a few key things, and to go back to simplification of marketing,
Go for it. Yeah.
all marketing is relationship building at scale. So yeah, big names, Stephen Bartlett, they all started small, right? And over the years they've built up. Not everyone can make it by following the same footsteps, right? Like he started with agencies at the right time, social media agencies, social chain, and he's very deliberately built his profile up. But you know, and he will say this himself, right? With Diary of a CEO, he couldn't imagine when he started what it would become now. So he just did things like you are and started it, and I think that's a lot of the way things start. So if you think of marketing as relationship building, it is how do you build up those communities in lots of different areas. So podcast is one, but online, as you know, it's so hard to build a community online from nothing. Like it's not impossible, but it's really, really difficult. And it's probably expensive because at some point you're going to have to spend money on ads because that's the quickest return you will get. And as soon as you start doing that, you're going to come up against people who are bidding more and they're just going to swallow you up. So that's very, very difficult. But there are a lot of commercial opportunities for podcasts. But I think this is the interesting stage we're at with marketing and how it's changed over, let's say, like the last 10, 15 years. So it's become more democratic, right? With technology, social media, anyone can start a business, anyone can start podcasts. You need a little bit of technical knowledge, but those barriers aren't what they used to be. We talked about different platforms, you talked about your kit, and it's all affordable. And then if you don't know what you're doing, you go on YouTube, you watch a few videos, you start building up. So it used to be that you needed all this specialist knowledge, specialist equipment. It was often technical to do these things. That's not the case anymore. So there's massive opportunity, but because of that, every marketplace now is saturated, particularly online. But if you go back to that relationship building, I think still the most effective, I haven't looked at the stats recently, but still the most effective form of marketing is word of mouth and that personal touch. I think anything becomes, when it becomes saturated, people look for something else, right? So I think people are looking for more of those in-person opportunities, the networking, the face-to-face. I think doing that is key to your growth. And if you want to build this thing, meet new people, and you're just open to opportunities, let's just continue doing that. And the podcast is one thing that you do, and it allows opportunities like this, but it's not the only thing. I think that's really important. And with podcasts and with content is now the product. And that's really strange as well. And when you're a marketer who's, I mean, one, I'm 41, so I remember the time before social media, before phones, all these things. But also when I, kind of started in marketing, or when you grow up and everyone's aware of marketing, but it was very different, right? And still people think of it as a lot of advertising and promotion, and that's just part of it. But where content started and content marketing was businesses thinking, how can we enter more conversations? How can we reach more people through the conversations that are already happening, through the communities they're already in, and keep growing like that? Because they saw the opportunity, particularly with spread of the internet, and it's content hungry. There are billions of people now online, constantly spending large chunks of their day looking online, scrolling, whatever, searching for information. So you keep feeding that. And now you have this situation. Stephen Bartlett is a little bit of a different example, but you've got people who, through like content creators, right, or influencers, who are building audiences and then selling them something, rather than I've got something to sell, let's build an audience to sell them that. So it's kind of flipped it, which is great in some ways, but it also creates, I think, it's really difficult to find those opportunities. And in marketing or thinking strategically, I kind of think you've got two approaches. There's exploration, where you are just discovering, you're trying things. So I'm going to start a podcast, I'm going to start this like networking group, I'm going to try and go on someone else's podcast or whatever, do a bit of social media, whatever it is. That's all exploration, and you're not sure what the opportunity is, but you're doing things and you're hoping something will emerge. You maybe have a rough idea, but you're not sure yet. So that's exploration. Exploitation is the other side, and it kind of emerges from the exploration, where you land on something. You've got this idea of whatever it is. If you want to monetize a podcast, you can do that, but you do need audience growth and that size, and there's different ways of doing that. But exploitation, you've got this idea, you think it could be commercial, and you see an opportunity because you see that gap in the market. Someone is not doing this, and there is a need, a demand for it that you can fulfill, and you go for it. So you're exploiting the opportunity, but also the weakness of competitors, of like what they're not doing, where they're not looking. And again, the opportunities to do that are more frequent. You don't need the huge investment that you used to need, but also
for exploitation.
Yeah, because you have to move quickly. You do need resources, but also because it's so fast moving. If you are successful, someone's watching you, and they're going to quickly imitate and throw more resource at it. So It's a crazy time we live at the moment for business, for marketing. I think for any job as well, like whatever your role is, we're going through so much change, and it's so quick moving, and the ability to do things at pace is key. Like being adaptable and seeing opportunities, but also being open and going back to that idea of exploration, that you're not fixated on one thing. Stephen Bartlett, he's pivoted many times in his career. Lots of businesses now, the thing that they start with isn't necessarily the thing that becomes successful, or they adapt and evolve as they're going on, because they're always looking at what is the opportunity that is emerging and how can we fulfill that need. So I think growing the podcast, we'll come back to Stephen Bartlett as well, because it's a good opportunity, like it's a good example to use. He's not really focused on growing the podcast. I mean, he is, but he's more focused on growing his personal brand, and the podcast is part of that. So again, it's you, right? It's going to be Luca. It's how you build your personal brand, and with branding, you've got personal brand, you've got the corporate brand. So Facebook, Nike, people like that, brands like that, and then you've got the product brand as well. You can also, you can go into kind of country brands when it comes to tourism and all these things. But are you growing the podcast as a product, or are you growing you, Luca, as a personal brand, and then looking to build up connections, a network, a community, and then see what opportunities spin out of that?
I think it's funny you mentioned that. I think I totally forgot about the personal brand there for a second. I don't think I necessarily would. I don't think, well, I know I'm not growing it commercially, because if I was, then I would have to look at a bunch of things I'm probably not even looking at right now. Personal brand. Just a side note on that. I know I'm also doing it for a personal brand, and the reason I know that is because about now we're in 2026. Let's say 2025. So 2025. So it was just before I started the podcast. Having had the idea in 2024, I was on the internet, and I was like, I think it was like something like on internet on YouTube that said something along the lines of, if Mark Zuckerberg, who's already a billionaire, is starting, and you can actively see him building his own personal brand, and he's a good example, because I don't remember seeing Mark Zuckerberg doing that many interviews or appearing online that many times back in, I don't know, before COVID, as opposed to say what was in 2024, 2025. And the video was sort of like describing, well, if billionaires and millionaires and people who've already made it are intentional about building their personal brands, then why aren't you? And I was like, oh, that's really a cool, interesting thing. So part of the podcast, I guess, going back to the reasons you sort of like asked me before and the question you're asking me now, I guess one of the reasons is also probably building my own personal brand, and sort of like meeting new people, so like putting myself out there, and yeah, answering the question as well now. Yeah, I think also there's a personal brand aspect to it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, and that is true. Like you do see a lot more high-powered people. I mean, not even the billionaires, but the people who are senior leaderships, like C-suite of businesses, big businesses. You and I might not know their names, but some of them are in charge of multi-million, multi-billion-pound businesses, and they're also building their personal brand. Obviously, mostly on LinkedIn. I've done quite a bit of work on that with a few people. But yeah, you're right. I mean, people talk about attention economy and all of this, and it is because it's that flip again, right? Of like building an audience, building a presence. You're not necessarily, I mean, the one I always use is Kim Kardashian, because she's kind of like famous for being famous. And from that, she spun out all of these businesses, and some of them in the billions, right? Because she's used her name as leverage and created all these deals. Now, she's clearly capable from a commercial marketing point of view, but let's not pretend for 1 second that she started as an ordinary person and built these businesses up from scratch. She's built her reputation, her personal brand, and then had some ideas, or had people come to her with ideas and be like, do you want to get involved? Would you put your name to this and maybe some money? But other people have done it, but she's got those opportunities from building her brand. So And again, with marketing, and this is where it gets really hard. Like when you're marketing a product, marketing a business, service, something like that, and you're starting with that, and you're going out on social media, you're trying to build your email list and create those newsletters, you're going to events and all these things. You're building what I'd call like strategic awareness, and you're trying to be like very focused. This is kind of like old school textbook marketing. Like you look at your target audiences, you look at their demographics, psychographics, you build these profiles like ideal customer profile, avatar, you look at customer needs analysis, all these things. And then you're trying to create the content that matches those profiles, their interests, their needs, and then pull them to your product. But you're using the same channels like social media that everyone else is using, and a lot of these people they're going after general awareness, so opposite to strategic awareness. They don't care who you are, if it's 35-year-old high-flying lawyer in New York versus a 12-year-old kid in Bangladesh. They don't really care because it's about that number. The only metric they're looking at is how many followers have I got, and then from that, how much engagement have I got? Because if I get that and grow that, I can, one, monetize it straight away through online ads, but then also get these other opportunities through sponsorship or business opportunities. So that is just general awareness. You just want to be known as being you. It's a name. It's famous for being famous. That's all it is. Versus the strategic awareness of here's a business, here's a product, we've developed it, we need to market it. That's very, very different and becoming more difficult because actually you're often competing in the same space. And when you're creating content, if you get too intentional about it, think too hard about it, you put all this effort into making, I don't know, the perfect reel or whatever, and you're like, oh, this is great, it's going to perform really well, and it flops, and someone who spent 2 seconds doing something and then it goes viral, and you're thinking, what the hell? But that pressure isn't on you, and it's not on them until they get to a certain size. So it's very hard, like for marketers and professional marketers, that it's hard for me as a freelancer. It's hard when I was working with businesses and marketers working, when your job is marketer, competing with that, because a lot of the time you're competing for the same attention from potentially the same people. And when you're thinking too much about it and trying to grow it, it becomes more problematic, and you kind of overthink it.
Am I right in thinking that if we were to sort of like divide this sort of like conversation into like parts, the first one I think was about simplifying the wording into what's the business or what's the idea and what's the unmet need you're trying to fulfill and who's the client.
You're simplifying the wording in order to simplify the understanding, because words and thoughts, they just link. So it's finding the quickest, easiest way to describe things so that people understand instantly. They don't have to think about it. It's just automatic. They just go, right, I get that.
So obviously we've been through the example with the podcast as well. So we sort of like, I don't know to what degree we simplified that, but I could see the question you were asking and the reason behind it. I guess the second bit, I think the second part which we've just, I think, opened up was general awareness versus strategic awareness. So am I right in thinking that's like the second part?
Well, this is where you come to think about, so there's one that, you have an idea, like every business starts as an idea, but not every idea becomes a business, right? So you have to think, okay, I've got this idea. You start with those basic questions and understand, okay, what is it? What does it do? Who's it for? How is it different or better to the competition? So you're kind of like finding, marketing terms, your value proposition, always linking it back to value. And we can talk about that in a little while, but then also where to position it in the market relative to the other options. And by the way, one of those options is doing nothing, or it's something completely different and random, because you're trying to get people to choose your thing specifically versus, okay, let's think about podcasts. It's a commitment. Well, they might instead be cooking dinner or whatever it is. It's not necessarily a choice between watching your podcast or listening to it and another podcast, it could be something completely different. So you always have to think you're competing for attention against a whole load of different things.
So just because this is a great point you're making, I think, and the thing that just popped up into my head is well, two things popped up. Number one, when I try to get a guest on, to be honest with you, when I reach out to someone, most of them sort of like reply. I haven't had that many people say no, and the people who are saying no are more like not for me.
Yeah.
So there's that, and there is also the aspect of listeners and attention, which you just mentioned.
Yeah.
I guess going a bit back to part one and like simplifying the wording, how would you help? How could I simplify the wording when I guess introduce the idea to a person, or simplify the idea maybe in the first like intro shot? Like how would I simplify? Like would you say?
So the first one is when you're approaching people to come onto the podcast.
Yeah.
So I think with anything like that, whether it's podcasts or you're trying to get a business call with them, like a potential client, and you're starting to, it's that big, think of relationship building again, marketing. You're starting at that first point, that cold or maybe warm outreach. You have to make it obvious what the value is to them. So when you're pitching, so yes, you need to say, I've got this podcast and blah, blah, I've been doing this. Here's the concept behind it. Here are some previous episodes so you can have a look yourself. But what is the value specifically to that person? What is relevant to them? And value is always subjective. So it's a tricky thing because what I value will be different to what you value. So I always say start with the obvious practical things. So money, time, effort. Like we all want to either make more or save one of those things. So if you can link it to that, this isn't necessarily true of podcasts, right? But if you can link it to a direct benefit, I mean, it might be if someone's a business owner, come on your podcast, you'll increase your exposure, they'll get the commercial side of it. And then there's the kind of emotional value, right? And this is much, much trickier, but it would be in the case of podcast, you could frame it as, I'm really interested in meeting people with different experiences who are doing different things and giving them an opportunity to talk about their life, their passion, why they do it. Because I don't think we often have those chances in life. And I do it in a podcast setting because, yes, I'm trying to grow this thing because I think everyone's got something to contribute that's worthwhile to people, for people to hear, but also for you because it helps to understand things yourself when you're actually in this environment talking through, like beforehand. Like for me, for example, I have these conversations with clients. I've been marketing for businesses as well, agencies, whatever, where it's a full-time role and it's very busy and you're doing it, but you're often isolated. And this goes back to the start of the conversation when I said talking with founders, when you're so close to something, it's very hard for you to think about what the right answers are, what even the questions are, right? I mean, before I came on here, I said, have you got questions? You said, well, I don't normally share them, but let's try. And you sent me through this long list, which was great. But I was like, wow, this is like covering everything in marketing. It would take like a whole series of podcasts to cover. And then I was thinking beforehand, well, what would I focus on? And I was thinking about this today, like how would I enter this conversation? How would I start it? And we talked a little bit before we actually began recording. But earlier on, I was just thinking, just go in loose because you don't know. And again, with what I do with clients, which I always think is the best, is go in loose. There's a few questions to get started, but you've got no idea where it's going to go, and just let it go there and see what happens. But going back to the point about like how you present this and how you pitch it, always link it to value to that person, customer, guest, however you want to describe it. Frame that value very clearly in, this is what you could get from it. This is what other people have got from it and what they've told me. And also this is where in marketing, like testimonials, it's not just like hard results of like, so-and-so helped me grow X amount and blah, blah, blah. It's that emotional value of, do you know, I wasn't sure about being on this podcast, but I had such a good time. Luca was so good to talk to. And I came up with loads of ideas. And do you know what? I came away thinking, actually, I've been thinking about this in one way, and it gave me a fresh perspective that I was then able to go and this resulted in this and that. Those are the best kind of testimonials, proof points that you can get as thinking with a marketing hat on, of how do you prove the value of this. It's looking at people who have been through it and what they say and what they get from it.
Why are you here on the podcast?
I
Why
just thought
did you
it's real.
say
I've never
yes?
done podcasts, so obviously you recorded recently with Zach, who's a good friend of mine. I thought it'd be a good thing to do. And I'm someone that spends a lot of time learning, thinking about marketing, not just doing it, but like, how do you do it better? How do you do it simpler? Especially with AI now. Kind of, I mentioned that I'm a copywriter. That work is almost gone. Like, I hate that's happened, but that work existed because people either couldn't or didn't want to think and then have to write, like either the mental effort or the physical effort. Going back to value again, like anything that reduces effort, anything that's convenient, people will immediately go, oh yeah. And so yeah, like I spend a lot of time thinking about my own business as well. Like, it's changing shape all the time, and it's a lot harder to get clients now. One, because cost of living crisis, there's the war, like people are worried, they kind of get more insular and they're not thinking about growth necessarily. They're thinking about, let's just protect what we already have. And as a freelancer, that's very difficult. You have the technology side that's taking over. So before, I could be like, I'm a copywriter. I could write your articles, your blogs, your social posts, like all sorts. I can also do messaging, brand development. You can now go into AI platform and just go, right, pretend you're a copywriter or a marketer or a strategist or a marketing consultant, run me through a series of questions, come up with a strategy and a plan for me. It won't, I would argue, it wouldn't be as good as me. It wouldn't come up with what you get from a natural conversation and my own experience, but it will give you something very good, and it will definitely give you a starting point that you can then trial and develop and experiment with. So that's very, very tricky. So I came on this and agreed because Zach was doing it and thought, yeah, be open to it. It sounds cool. And I just thought, yeah, why not? And have an opportunity to talk about what I do and what I'm experiencing, because that same point I said to you about framing it, how often do you get to do that? Like, talk about yourself and explain it in a new way that isn't, I'm not pitching to you as a client. We're just having this normal conversation. I wouldn't be talking to my mates in the pub about what I do because it would bore them. So, right, I bore myself. So it's yeah, and that's what came to my mind when I said, like, this is how you could potentially pitch it and frame it, like, to their benefit, and thinking about what would they gain from it, and making the commitment low as well. So this is something with content, with marketing. Like, it's easy to consume content online for free, but getting someone to buy your product, buy into your service, then it has a cost. Then there's more risk attached to it as well. So people go, oh, hold on, and they need more persuasion, a lengthier process. With a podcast, something like this, it's a bigger commitment as well. Like, firstly, to record it, to edit it for you, to come onto it as well is more. It's a bigger time commitment. So there's more that you have to convey in terms of value, and reduce that commitment as much as possible. And then also, when people are watching it, it's a bigger commitment for them. It's what in marketing or psychology we call high involvement. There's high involvement, low involvement. So anything that involves a little bit more thought, suddenly you're having to think, it's not automatic, but I'm going to have to convince people and give them reasons why they should do that, and make those reasons really, really clear, and tie those reasons to something that they want. And in marketing, talking about relevance and how you start with customers, with audience, building up that understanding. I always start with the goal. What is that person looking to achieve? So think about, and it ties into identity and everything, but very specifically, there's something that they want to do that they're unable to do, and you're able to help them do that, and you need to tap into that. So with motivation, with persuasion, it's not up to you to try and like persuade and like, come on, we're going to do this thing. It's up to you to find what the motivation already is and what those blockers are, and show them, I can unblock this for you, and you tap into that. So with your guests, trying to persuade people, some people will automatically go, no, not for me. Other people will be like, actually, yeah. And then maybe they need to think about it. Maybe you need to send them a few examples. Maybe you need to jump on a 5-minute video call. Like, we met for a coffee in person, which is great, but there's a lower step before that, which would be low commitment. Let's just jump on a call, 5-10 minutes. I'll explain a little bit about it, and you can ask me your first questions about that. And it's thinking with anything, buying something cheap, quick, easy, spontaneous. Often we don't think about it. Anything that is more decision making, like either because there's more risk attached, you don't know the person, there's a reputational risk, you're not sure what benefit you'll get from it, or there's a cost. That could be a financial cost, or it could be a time commitment cost. Break it down. So to go from, in marketing, a lot of people talk about like dating. You don't go up to someone that you like and be like, will you marry me? There's a whole process of getting to know them and understand them and building that relationship before you get to that commitment. And you can shorten that just by breaking it down and looking for those small commitments. So anything, even, would you be open to having a 5-10 minute conversation with me to discuss this in a little bit more detail? Straight away, you're qualifying or disqualifying that person, and you've got a small commitment from them.
Is that how you would frame it? Would you be open to having a 5-10 minute conversation?
Yeah, but I wouldn't even start with that.
Okay.
I would start with the benefit.
Oh yeah, with the benefit. Yeah.
And then always, again, marketing, the CTA, call to action. You always want to attach a request and ask a next step to anything you do, because otherwise it just ends, and you want to be building up momentum towards the ultimate thing.
I agree, and I think that's one of the. I've been trying to be a bit more intentional with that. What's the value for you that I could tell you up front? And I've been trying. I think the last couple of emails I sent out to get guests on have been focusing on the emotional side of like, hey, I think you could really teach someone through your. If you come on the podcast and talk about, I don't know, say you found a business, if you talk about how you've done that and all the things you've struggled with, or the journey you've had, if you talk about that, then first you're going to teach me about it, because I think that's really cool, but also you're going to teach everyone else who's sort of like wanting to like hear about that. So I think I've been going at it from like an emotional side. And while you were talking, I have this idea in the back of my mind that I didn't even realize I could open it like that, because I think that's more of what you mentioned, like you mentioned emotional, and you also mentioned
like the practical.
And I think there's this, me and a friend. He was telling me about, obviously, and you mentioned, you sort of like alluded to the idea as well of, right, nowadays it's all about content, attention. How can businesses sort of like get that attention? Or very, very interesting what you mentioned, which was there's loads of high-level executives who you don't even know are running multi-million-dollar businesses right now, and they are trying to raise their profiles. And very interestingly, there's the bin car I told you about. It's going to make a lot of noise. Anyways, something really interesting that's sort of like, I'm not fully saying right now, but it's a great idea, is those people who are in those high positions trying to raise their profiles, that you and I might not know about, they don't necessarily, maybe they don't get invited onto podcasts, or they don't get invited onto, like, I don't know, CNN, MSNBC, so on and so forth. And an idea there is to, right, what if I offer you, look, maybe at the beginning don't pay me, I'll do it for free. I'll sit down with you, sort of like podcast form, or like something like that. I'll film the content for you. I'll edit. I'll give you 10, 30-second videos so that you can boost your profile. And all you have to do is say yes. That's a practical value for you. Commitment, obviously, you have to put in an hour or two, but that's for your own benefit.
Yep.
And all you have to do is say yes, and maybe introduce me to like a friend of yours. Give me a testimonial.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that because it's a cool. People, there's. I read about this business the other day that is literally doing that and is charging like hundreds of thousands of pounds, and he puts them on a retainer for like 3 months and like things like. I'm saying that because maybe that's like an idea with like the practical value. Maybe I should reach out to someone and say, hey, off the back of it, yes, you'll spend 2 hours or something like that, but you could use that content to promote your business and you don't have to pay any money for that.
Yeah.
And you're not even doing the work. You're not even paying me to do the work. I'm just doing it for you.
Yeah.
That's a very interesting thing you said about
Well, and also like thinking about the practical or emotional is because most of what we do is based on emotion. And proper marketing, you have to understand psychology, and emotion is motivation. So that's the key link. Like when our brain wants us to do something, it makes us do it through emotion. Like we desire something, like move towards something, or we pull away from it through fear, anxiety, all these things. So our emotional triggers, that is motivation. So it's always going to be the things that we do are always going to be tied to emotion. But in some things, again, with a higher risk, and some people, they're more rationally minded. Doesn't mean they're not doing things because of an emotional reason, but some things go, hold on, I need to think about this, this, this. So you have to kind of cover all bases. I would always say like lead with emotion and then back it up, because a lot of people say, again in marketing, like people make decisions based on emotion, and then they rationalize it. So you have to supply them the information to rationalize it to themselves and be like, oh, okay, even bad choices, right? Why did I do that? Oh, it's because of this and this. Or we reframe it for ourselves and go, yeah, but I got this from it, or whatever. So if you cover like both the emotion and that practical rational reasoning, you're in a very strong position. And this is all tied into like persuasion. But yeah, like make it about them. And I love that idea about giving that content and that opportunity to CEOs. And I've done a lot of that. But it's more, yeah, I've done like social posts, like LinkedIn posts, a lot, but it's more like strategy stuff, which is harder to sell because it's intangible, it's abstract. And this is something I've learned with my own business as well. Like ideally, you need a physical output to be like, you will get this, like you will get this recorded content that you can use for all of this. But thinking as a marketer and also as an opportunist, I'm like, well, yeah, like why don't we do something together where you can record people, you can offer it, we can get these testimonials, and then I'm looking at that content, I'm looking at themes for messaging, building a content plan, and then that's also something that gets sold. And you're like, okay, well, we've got this content, we've done this, these key themes emerged from this, and we could turn that into this content. Is that a conversation you're willing to have? And if if they've already got to know you, they've been through a process, they're very happy with the end product that you've given them, all for free, and then you're coming on with this other, that is how businesses, that's how marketing agencies, how they grow.
And that's all sounding great and good and amazing. The thing that is not stopping me from like sending the email, like sort of like, hey, here are the things that you could get from it. The thing that is always at the back of my mind is, however, this: if you don't know me and I don't know you, obviously apart from what I've read online, and I send you that thing like in an email, I always think, well, look, I'm biased. I've put everything in the email, for example, like, look, here's the practical value you will get from it. Here's the emotional side of it. The next thing I'm thinking about is, will they read the email? Will they like? Because like,
Well, then, yeah.
when I get a message, like I used to get like a link. Well, not anymore, but I used to get like LinkedIn messages from, people from India, saying, "Look, I will help you scale you. I will bring like 1,000 views to you." And I'm like, bullshit.
I know.
Bye bye. So like, how do I like? How do I?
Well, this is the
past that?
problem for marketing. Like when it's your job, because you're fighting against all of this. I find it incredible. Like I'm like very insular, introverted. I find it really difficult. Like neurodivergent, whatever you want to call it. I don't know, but I find noise really, really, really difficult, and that constant bombardment really, really difficult. And working in marketing and comms, that's obviously a huge problem because you're kind of in it all day. And this is the kind of thing that I think about regularly. Of like one, yeah, you get. I mean, it used to be agencies in India and Pakistan, places like this. Now it's just AI, right? It's just automated, just constantly sending out. And of course it's rubbish. It's of course not. But they're just looking, again, because it's easy for them to produce and send this stuff automatically. And they're just hoping they'll get one or two people for every 10,000 they send, whatever. For them, it's just a numbers game. But again, if you're then competing for similar attention in similar ways, it gets very hard and people turn off. And there's a thing in psychology called reactance theory where people behave in the opposite way that you want. And it's very, very hard with marketing, with persuasion, because it's so easy to come on too strong, too soon. And suddenly people are like, whoa, back off. And again, like relationship building or trying to find a partner, come on too strong, too quickly, too soon, you're too keen. They're going to go, whoa, whoa, no, back off. We have that same issue. And I kind of think like with LinkedIn, like those messages or just emails, I find it very difficult to look at my email inbox now, and it's just like nonsense. Um, remember like websites, what they used to be? We'd have those banners, every website, pop-up banners, pop, 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 pop. They're kind of coming back, but they disappeared because of what became known as banner blindness, because people just ignored them. So they stopped being effective. And we're seeing the same thing now with email. We're seeing the same thing with those direct messages. And with AI trying to impersonate people and getting better and better, more sophisticated, it's harder to come across as genuine, as personal. And almost the moment you offer something, people, that reactance, they're like, whoa, no, not interested. And the door shuts and it's very hard to get in. So I would say, coming back to the point about building a community, building your brand, building awareness, it's rather than a cold approach, it's a warm approach. So with guests, you talk about, is there anyone you could introduce me to that might be interested? These are the types of people that I would love to connect with and to get on the podcast. And you give them that kind of brief description. So it could be a CEO of a local business, right? Start small, start local. You're more likely to succeed. Then through your networking, you do a similar thing and you're talking to people there. By the way, I loved our conversation about so-and-so. Either would you come on the podcast with me, or do you know anyone who would be interested in this that might be a good fit? They are then introducing people. It's that referral. So you've already got that warm entrance. And if they have done their job and they've spoken, like Zach did with me, just spoken to Luca, I'm doing this podcast, he's done one with my brother, put your name forward, blah, 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 would you be interested? Shall I connect you? And I was like, sounds cool. Yeah, like happy to have the conversation. And that's how it starts, rather than this kind of like mass scale mail shot, whatever you're trying to do, of like reach random people. I think those days are done. And so you have to think more like, who are the people I know in my existing network? And then the other thing that you're doing alongside that is building your personal brand. And in this case, you're not going to be at the stage until you get a big enough following where opportunities come to you. But what you do have is a presence for people to like verify you and check you out. And I think that's an important thing with social media. I mean, I have a love-hate relationship with it. And I spoke to you beforehand, I'm only on LinkedIn now. And even that, I deleted all my posts, all my activities, because I just had a moment.
Well,
But it was, again, that kind of reaction of, I think the thing is, because I had to spend so much time on it, and the last year and a bit, and it is a contradiction, right? Because I've been doing this for other people, but I had to spend so much time on it, and seeing AI slop and it did overwhelm me. And I was just like, for my own mental health, for my own sanity, needed to just come off it. Dipped in again, dipped out. And again, I'd just be like, right, for now, I'm just not focusing on that. I know how it works. I know how to use it. I know how to leverage it. I know the importance of it. But right now, the costs outweigh the benefit for me. So that's why I'm not. But if you're building your brand, it doesn't have to be LinkedIn, obviously, but it's where your ideal audience is, where they are. That's where you want to build a profile. And so it's not necessarily the case that you're getting through them through organic reach or even paid reach, but they are able to check you out. Like it's a verification.
Can you look? I actually need some help on this because, not some help. I need someone to tell me. Maybe you should think about this. In my honest opinion, I think LinkedIn is bullshit. I think I see some people do posts, and I'm like, that's so fake. Like I could tell, not necessarily that you've used the AI to create the post, but is that what you would say to me in real life? And it's hard for me to understand what the point of LinkedIn is, apart from what you've just said. Look, it's a very good platform to sort of list where you've worked and sort of that history there. And I'll be honest, what I do like about LinkedIn is exactly that, because it allows me to right, if I'm gonna have someone like you, or I had a call with a very cool guy the other day, and I was able to get most of the information before the call, before finding out about him from the call. I was able to get that information from LinkedIn. But apart from that, I look at it and I'm like,
I know.
so how do you?
Well, this is like I say, it's really difficult.
Yeah.
As a marketer, how do you get in front of people with something genuine, like a genuine offer? You're not trying to scam people. You're not trying to
Right?
you've got value. You can help them.
How do you convince me of what you're saying is real? It's not just
so the
made up.
problem, and this is the issue. So all LinkedIn, their job from a business perspective, how they get their money is to get as many members online as possible and to keep them there. So that's all they care about. They don't care about the value you can offer. And so the people that succeed at building their profile on things like LinkedIn are the ones that play the algorithm. And that means you have to give, you trial a lot of different content, but the things that work are basically anything that kind of sells fear and hype, those two things that in marketing you see overused all the time. Like, the world's going to end unless you do these three things, or this quick hack will save you 15, whatever it is. It's exaggerated both ends and it triggers people, or it's that clickbait and we'll go, oh, what's that? And then they've got you. But those people that succeed, what they don't tell you, or sometimes they do if they're genuine, but often what they don't say, to get to that level where they build enough followers and it's more organic, they've spent 6 months, 10, 12, 15 hours a day on LinkedIn producing their own content, but also more than that, engaging with as many people as possible to get followers and to it's just playing the algorithm. So obviously, the more you're on the platform, the more it will push you forward. The more people you connect with, they will then get your content. Their first connections will get your content, and it grows like that. But that's the only way they're doing it, or they get into paid promotion as well. But I agree. I mean, LinkedIn, it's not what it was, but this is true of every social media platform, because they just care about the most money. And then it turns into what is currently happening. A lot of paid posts. You see, it's just advert after advert, sponsored content. And then this AI slop that is fake and just ridiculous. Or there's, and this is the struggle for me as well. When previously, consultancy services, strategy, it's not a thing, it's not a product. So you have to sell it in a way of if you're trying to do this, try this, or these are 3 things I helped, or I helped this client do this. And after a while, I got bored of writing the stuff and hearing myself. I was just like, it just feels like nonsense, because it feels too performative. It's not organic. So the other route of doing it, what you see is people just sharing a lot of personal stuff. And again, that gets too much at times. Or, like I said earlier, you go the route of don't treat it as I need to do posts, and just do a like very random post what interests you, something that you thought of, make it like unintentional, as almost like as a deliberate tactic. I'm just going to treat it as whatever. I'm just going to post and saw this thing, listened to this podcast, spoke to this person the other day, thought this was really interesting. Because actually, that is the more organic stuff, and UGC, user generated content, is still like really popular, and that is what people connect with, because we all have that inbuilt kind of radar that knows bullshit a mile off. And even AI gets more sophisticated, but it's too polished. At the end of the day, it's code, it's binary, it's trying to find all these patterns, and often the best stuff is random and breaks patterns and all these things. And when you're in it and when you're deliberately trying to grow, you start to spot these things. And what you spot and what I see, it's so obvious, but it's not necessarily obvious to a lot of people who are going on it. And that's the thing, and that's why it is successful. And then it feeds itself, and more people do that content because it gets them results.
So talk to me a bit about the pattern breaking, because obviously, because LinkedIn, we've just talked about it, obviously you see loads of like the same content going out and out and out. And what you've just described as well was, well, if you could also be intentional, like, hey, maybe rather than like selling or like putting this story up, maybe the next thing you could do is like being a bit random and post something that's like a bit different than the content you would normally put out. So what other, how would you try to, if you were to like go into a business and help them with the marketing, how would you sort of like start thinking about how to be creative or pattern breaking so that there's more engagement, or like nicely more engagement, because like that comes with time, but how do you like sort of like try these new things? Because earlier you talked about exploration and exploitation. So how do you do a bit more exploration that also aligns with
So you look
whatever
at
that is?
so there's a few things. So one, you want to be where your ideal audience are. So look at the brands that they follow, the people they follow, the conversations, and you're trying to join those conversations, right? And if it's your personal brand, this is much easier than a corporate brand. But you're getting involved in those conversations, and things like your kind of housework, making sure your profile looks smart, explains what you do, all this kind of stuff, so people can find you. But that's one way of doing it, looking at who your audience is and where they are already naturally, and trying to join those conversations rather than starting something completely on your own. Also, that gives you more information, more intelligence. So I think the best, whether it's social media or Reddit, for example, or customer reviews, you get so much good information about what people are thinking, what they believe, the problems they're having. There's so much good stuff there that you can actually repurpose as your own content as well, and it'll give you inspiration and ideas. Thinking of something on your own in isolation is, don't do that ever. So one thing is having these conversations. You could, as I do, as I'm sure you do, lots of people do, also use AI as a conversation, like, what do you think about this, and do that, and look at what people have already said, and you start building up those patterns and building that picture. So it's one way is looking at what your ideal customers, your audience is, where they are, what kind of things they're saying, and looking at what things come up repeatedly, and okay, this is a problem, maybe that's overlooked, and this is a familiar theme. The other thing is to look outside your category, your industry. So there's lots of examples. I'm thinking of like products like simple ones like liquid death, like you put water in a can and you make it look different. That's quite a famous example, but you're looking at what works in other industries. A lot of clients, businesses I work with are B2B service industries. They tend to be very risk averse, very boring, like very formal. So immediately, if you look at a brand like Liquid Death and think about, it's completely different. So someone's not naturally linking the two. What are they doing in their marketing, in their visual identity, in their messaging, in their campaigns, their advertising, that we could maybe look at for inspiration? Like creativity, all you're doing is taking one thing and another thing and creating a midpoint. Like, what's the thing that links the two? So just looking outside of what you're doing. I mean, looking at where we are sat now with all these crazy pictures and interesting objects and things like that. So if you've got a service, a podcast, you've got these branded mugs. So that's good because you've got your branding, but I would say that's quite common, familiar thing that everyone does. So what's the different thing that you could do? Like take inspiration from something like this. Again, some things cost money, so I'm not suggesting this, but imagine presenting someone, a guest or a hopeful guest or a company, with some weird oil painting that you've done of you guys together or capturing this image. It's just something strange and unexpected. And pattern breaking, as a copywriter, we talk a lot about hooks, those first sentences or a headline to a blog or something like that. You want to break a pattern and create a curiosity gap where someone's going, hold on, what's this? This is interesting. I want to find out more. And you just pull them in more and more. And there's two ways to break a pattern. And I got this, I'm a big film fan, and years ago I did I've done some practical filmmaking, but also film writing, screenwriting. And like kind of you create surprise, and this is how I link it to marketing. And this is an example of something where I've taken knowledge from something else and applied it to something where it fits, in this case, screenwriting to marketing. And you break a pattern, either something expected doesn't happen or something unexpected does happen. So because we're all so used to familiarity, our brains are prediction tools. So they'll jump ahead and go, oh yeah, I know what this is. So when we're reading, we don't really read every word. We quickly skim and we get the gist and we fill in the blanks, and our brains are constantly like a split second ahead of what we're actually doing or reading. So you need to stop that brain, like shift it from that automatic processing to that more thoughtful, deliberate, conscious processing. Either a surprise of like, whoa, what the hell, visually, verbally, something loud, unexpected happens, or that they weren't expecting, or you're following something familiar and you know what that pattern is. Usually when someone's talking about this, it leads to this. How do you completely introduce something totally random that people go, what is this? Like, I've never thought of this before. And then and this is where a hook isn't clickbait, because then you deliver on the information, you give them the value that they expect. That's a lot of theory and talk. I haven't given you the concrete example, but does that help you?
That helps me. And while you were this is this is very interesting. No, I think I've got definitely a question about the first the persona, who the user is. I've got some questions about that.
Yeah.
But just the thing you've just mentioned right now, I think it makes a lot of sense, and I didn't even think of so for example, I've done different videos, and one of the things that it just so happened, we were just talking, you just described 20 minutes ago about opportunities come to you, or they will come at some point, especially when you've got a bigger audience. But as an example, I had a very cool person on the podcast, Jack Flower, and he owns Flower Property, which is a real estate business here in Bath. And he came on the podcast, he liked it, and then it just so happened that he wanted to shoot a couple of podcasts for himself, so he invited me to do that for him, and it was a really cool opportunity to do that. And part of it was also doing some short form clips for the business as well. And I had to think about, well, hooks. How can we create a good enough hook that will obviously capture the viewer's attention? I think what you've just described with the breaking a pattern that people expect to happen, or doing something unexpected.
Yeah.
And that was something really that's something really interesting that I think helps me in thinking of, right, the hook, does it have this or does it not have it? If it doesn't, maybe there's something wrong with it. And the example that popped into my mind while you were discussing, where you were just describing that, was there's this meme on the there's this like funny video on the internet, and I think everyone knows it. You might have seen it as well. I'd be surprised if you didn't. I might be doing a very bad job now describing it, but is this video of the guy in a garden, sunny outside, and he kicks the football, and his mum is sat on like a chair like this, like sunbathing, and you can see him kicking the football ball, and like it hits her in the face, and obviously that was like the video, but people sort of like took that and cut it, and like because everyone sort of like expects to see the mom being hit in the face, the thing didn't happen. It's like, what's this video? I think it made a lot of sense what you were just describing. Yeah.
And that's the thing, like, so we're talking in like very abstract terms. So like me talking about these concepts, these ideas, I don't know what that, like, I can't really give you suggestions without looking at content, because, you know, it's like, well, I have no idea. But I think that's where the skill comes in. And going back to AI, because it will know all these things, but it's just a tool, right? You have to give it direction, give it instructions, like set it up, give it a role and purpose, all these things. So one thing is like using AI, but the other thing is knowing what you're looking for and pulling it out. Because I don't know, I mean, I use it a lot, but I argue constantly with AI because I'm like, no, this is rubbish, this is what I mean, and look here and all this. But I find that useful because it's a conversation like we're having. But this is where I think the skill with content creation, with marketing, with things like I do, is, you know, all the knowledge in the world is available online. And it was always available, or it has been for a number of years, right? Google, you can find it if you committed the time and went through it. So that's been there for a long time. And now with AI, it shortens that process and helps you get closer to maybe the answer that you want or that you're looking for, you're trying to discover. But I still think the skill, and because that is now flattening it. So again, when I talked about before you needed all these technical skills, equipment to create all this content, that's now no longer the case. So more people get involved. It's harder to stand out. The skill, and this is the mistake I think that people often make with marketing, is they focus on the output. So I'm going to make a podcast, I'm going to do a social media post, or whatever it is. They think of the end product. That's essentially all the same. Like there's, you know, you don't create what channels and platforms there are. You don't create what, you know, a podcast or a blog is or whatever. You create what goes into it. And so I always think, right, you've got the output, that's very similar. You might have the resources to put out extra output and then distribute that to bigger audiences. But I think the focus is on the input. And again, that's where strategy comes in. It's the thinking behind the doing. Like, what are you actually doing? Like, are you, and this is, you know, marketing, positioning, strategy, you are looking for a competitive advantage. And that's hard to do, and it's getting harder and harder. But if everyone's using AI, it's going to come up with similar answers unless you are then able to go, well, hold on, and dig deeper and deeper and deeper. And that is what I do. That's what we're doing now. And it's a hard thing to sell to people beforehand, like without going through the process.
Because they don't see the they want to see the output.
Exactly.
But you're giving them the input, which is...
Yeah, exactly. They're like, well,
yeah.
What are you giving me? And, you know, previously as a copywriter, I'd be like, well, I'm giving you a website copy, I'm giving you email sequence, you know, all these things. And now, you know, and as part of that, I would do the strategy, but I'd kind of like, you know, here's the tangible output is my entry point. By the way, to get there, we do this, and this is where the real value is. And then people start thinking, oh, I never thought of that. And they have different business ideas as well, because marketing, you can't separate marketing and the business. You have to get into it, every aspect of it, and understand it. But yeah, like what we're doing now, like without me going through a whole process and like going through all your podcast material and going through it in more in depth, a conversation like this, I hope you go away having lots more ideas and going, actually, that's something I hadn't thought about, and let me try that, or let me speak to Alex about this and run this past him, and we have that back and forth. And I love that. That's brilliant. What I'm finding is that's quite a hard thing to sell and put a monetary value on, and to get a commitment. it's very, very difficult, and that's one of the challenges I'm having. And another, yeah, kind of like benefit of being on here and talking through all of this.
Yeah, absolutely, because it's hard for people to like buy a service that
Well, they
they
can't
kind of,
see.
yeah, they can't see.
Yeah,
So you have to like either trust it, or for you to present, I guess, the testimonials we were talking about earlier, or the case studies you sort of like worked on before, that will prove, hey, this is the ad I've made for McDonald's,
yeah,
and this is what the results have been. So I guess that's
yeah,
sort of like authenticity that comes from it. A
yeah,
question I had about, because you mentioned sort of like find out who your audience is, or like who the user or who the client is for your product. That was the first thing you said. The second thing you said was obviously the pattern breaking, and that there was a third thing you said, which was
well, like looking at competition or outside your category or
outside of
industry.
category. Yes, I think the thing that is most interesting, and I think interesting, and also I feel like hardest because I don't know how to approach it. I was sitting down with this really cool person, Mahika is her name, and she's got her own podcast. And I just reached out to her around November, and we jumped on a call. We agreed to the podcast, but one of the questions she asked me was like, "Who's your demographic?" I was like, "Well, I don't know. Like, I could say, like, looking at the YouTube analytics, it says here like between, I don't know, 20 and 35 year olds, 20 and 35 year olds, and most people watch it from the UK, things like that." And she was telling me that I should really have a 2 to 3 sort of like personas of like, here is who a user could be. This is what they do. This is what they listen to. This is how they spend their time. This is who like they are.
Yeah.
But and I sort of like spoke about it with her on when we did the podcast a couple of weeks ago. The thing that I don't really get is how do I don't necessarily know like how to like choose that person, like how to like, is it me choosing it, and how
No,
do I like,
well,
yeah, I
yeah. So, well, you can do that, but that will give you irrelevant data. So normally, if you're on your platform, so you're looking at analytical demographic data, so you can get those like, yeah, it's between these ages and these countries. I think on a mass scale and for big businesses, that's potentially useful, and you can target those. But actually, all that demographic data doesn't really mean much. What's more important is the psychographic. So that's the kind of motivations there, people. So that's more what I focus on. And it's the same thing. It's like building a persona, an avatar, ICP, a kind of ideal customer or client profile. It's the same thing. There's lots of different words for it. But yeah, you're just building that general picture. And I think the difficulty with Democrat, if it's a female with this age and the favorite platform is Facebook and they spend this, like, you're potentially missing all those other people, and all those people that fit that profile don't necessarily behave in the same way, whereas psychographic looks at the behaviors. So it could be very, very different people from different parts, but they all have something in common that is pulling them together. So I go back to what is the motivation, what is the value to that person. So what is it that they share, that thing that they want to do or they want to learn, that you're able to give them. So I think of like giving someone a role. So that could be I do more business and like B2B. So that could be like they're an accountant working for, whatever. It's just a title. So it's easier to like build out that persona. And okay, I know we're targeting accountants who are looking to do this certain thing, or in this size company, that kind of thing. That just gives you that starting point. And then you're looking at the goal. So what is the thing they're trying to do? And I break that into 3 core things. And this leans into the kind of practical and emotional. You can break it down to that, by the way. You can just go, what's the practical thing they're looking to do? What's the emotional need, or even the like kind of symbolic as well, or psychological? You can do it that way. Or you can kind of group it. I group it into 3 ways, which is 3 goals grouped into survival, success, and self. So survival is we all have those basic needs of, if we're in a situation, we have a problem, we need we need to avoid something bad. And that doesn't have to be as dramatic as a life or death situation. It could be, if you're an accountant, like missing, tax filing or whatever it is, there's something that needs to be solved there that's about survival. Success is just about getting ahead. Like, how do you improve? How do you get that promotion? How do you build up your knowledge? All of those things. And then self is about identity, and that's linked in with desire. Like, we all have that image of ourselves that we're projecting into the future. And this is a lot of what marketing is filling that image, because human emotions, they're pretty consistent between people. It's the direction that changes. So we think whatever, like money, whatever it is, we think that is going to fulfill a deeper need, like that deeper emotional or psychological or sort of identity gap that we're feeling. It's just about filling that gap. The way you understand it based on these things, like someone's either trying to do something, like avoid something, achieve something, or be someone, thinking about like that. And then the best thing, if you have audience, like people that you can speak to, either guests, listeners, talk to them, like just like we're having a normal conversation. Don't interview them, but know you're trying to understand what is their motivation for listening, what value are they getting from this, and it might be something completely unexpected, right? So you talk to them. So that's one way and that's the best way, talking to kind of existing audience, customers. Another way is going on to, reviews, like I said earlier, like Reddit, all these things, looking through social media. You can look again, like Stephen Bartlett, like popular podcasts, you go onto YouTube, Spotify, look at the comments, like under an episode that you listened to that you liked. What are people saying? Like, a lot of it will be rubbish, but there'll be a few gems, and you go, that's interesting. So a few people, and you'll see if people then comment and there's a thread going on, you'll be able to see what they're talking about, something interesting. And then the other way is using AI. Again, like this is where I use it as well, that's really beneficial. So you give it that scenario of what you're trying to do, like, how do I understand my audience, their motivation? Like, imagine you're someone listening to this podcast, what kind of things, and you like role play it that way. And then you're always testing as well. So you can test by obviously the podcast content itself, but then how you seed it, how you distribute it, how you promote it, and then the feedback. You're always like looking what's happening, and trying to have as many conversations as possible with people. Does that answer your question?
I think it does. I think it helps me put things in perspective and sort of like gives me a map of what I could be looking at. I think the most interesting thing that I took from it, like because it applies more to like the podcast, or at least that was the example I was thinking of, is the survival success self.
Yeah.
Because what you had described before that was giving a role and like sort of like, what was it?
A goal, a role,
a goal and a role. And it's I was trying to like sort of like think, well, what could be the goal of them listening to the podcast, or what could be like their goal of like in life that a podcast or like an episode could support them in that. And while I was thinking about that, I was like, that's a bit difficult to like how that's like so specific. But then when you started talking about survival, success, and self, the success, that sort of like made sense, because if, for example, someone, I don't know, Jenny from the block, is looking to open up her own shop and sell candles and wants to think about marketing, then this could be a good example of like, right, Alex and Luca are talking about marketing, and they spoke about different things, one of which was how do you like build up that persona, that avatar.
Yeah.
Maybe Jenny from the block would be interested in that, so that falls into the category of success and helps create that that persona. Yeah. So I think that made sense. Yeah.
And I think the self part, the identity, you don't really have to talk much about that, because if you nail the sort of survival or success, people have their own reasons underneath those things for why they want to do that. And this is why it's important to establish the role. So you, Luca, here, podcast host, you're in a different role to as you are as like Luca, the programmer at work, or Luca, out with your mates or with your family. And then your goals shift as well. But underneath it all, there's the same idea of self, and it's very complex, complicated. There's so many things that go into that. But that's constant. There's always a reason underneath everything, why you're doing things, where you want to get to. And then within that, there are these more individual, specific, contained goals. And if you attach the value of what you're doing to those, people will ascribe their own deeper desires and information. You don't always have to. I always think this in marketing as well. Like there's
Say it one more time, because like that was a bit complicated, and I'm trying to like follow.
so if you start with the obvious things that people are trying to do, either survival, success, relate it to one of those two things. You don't necessarily have to go deeper because they will naturally, automatically go deeper themselves, because there's always, who we are. We're always who we are in everything we do, but certain different things come to the surface depending on what we do. So if you're working right now and you've got a deadline, a bit of client work, whatever, your goal, and maybe you don't know, maybe you're stuck, you don't know how to do something. So all of a sudden you're searching on YouTube, how do I do this thing? Because you have to complete that specific goal in that specific moment because of the role that you're performing to. And it has a certain set of expectations that come with it, that you need to know this thing, you need to be able to do these things. Here's the information to give it. But behind that is so much more of like, I want to be good at my job. I want to be competent. I want to get a promotion. I want to earn more money, or I want to, whatever it is. There's so much going in the background. So you don't necessarily, as a marketer, as like marketing your podcast, have to attach a deeper meaning to why people should do this. You do absolutely need to find what that goal is and tap into that. And then you can allow people to bring their own reasons behind that.
So, for example, in the example you gave, which was I've got a deadline, I need to like find out how to do something. I might go on YouTube, and then the deeper meaning of that could be, well, I know that if I perform well in like the following couple of deadlines, I might be promoted.
Yeah.
You were saying at the end, then you need to find the goal that.
It's the most immediate thing. That's always the thing, because all people, we're lazy. Unless something's right in front of us, we're not going to do it. Like if we did think logically about the future and everything, we'd all be saving for retirement. We'd all be like very carefully planning. We'd be looking after our health. We wouldn't be drinking too much or eating the wrong things. We don't do that. We look at the immediate opportunity and what we want to do in that moment. So you can, of course, link things to the future, but that's hard sell. You need to make it more urgent, more specific to right now. This is how this thing will help you right now. And by the way, it will also lead to these future benefits.
So you're talking about positioning to not necessarily like the promotion in the example you gave,
No.
but to the immediate result outcome, which is this is how you can complete your deadline.
Yeah. Because you're not thinking about the promotion in that moment, are you? You're thinking, one, I need to complete this work. Maybe because it's Friday, it's the end of the week, you want to go home, you don't want to have to stay in the office. Or if you're under a lot of pressure, and there's a really big, important client, you're thinking, I don't want to lose my job. I need to do this and get this right. And then that obviously reasons behind that. There's a much bigger, deeper picture, but you don't have to tap into that. You need to just tap into the immediate thing. I mention it just because there's always that self, that identity piece that's always present, because it's us, that's that deeper meaning. I think where marketers get it wrong is they overplay that. And there's a big, years ago, every brand started talking about purpose. And it was led by, big brands like Nike, the Colin Kaepernick, like taking a knee and believing, what it will stand for, what you believe. I can't even remember the slogan, but all these things. But it kind of led to this, just every brand piling into purpose and sort of saying, this is what our purpose is. And, they were kind of like inventing it, you'd have like toothpaste brands saying, we're trying to change the world. And so it's not, you're selling toothpaste so people can brush their teeth and have good hygiene and not have bad breath or not have teeth falling out. That's the immediate thing. You don't have to go beyond, because then again, it becomes unbelievable, which is what you don't want. You want to keep it real, relevant to what that person is experiencing in that moment.
I think I get what you mean now. Thank you. It makes sense. It makes sense, and I think I could see if I was to imagine like two examples where like, hey, this video is talking about, I don't know, promotion, and this video is talking about fixing a problem I'm looking to fix now. I'm more likely to click on that video than on the other one. Makes a lot of sense.
And then with the hook, so you're looking for the video that describes the exact solution to your exact problem. So how to blah blah in 3 easy steps or in less than 5 minutes or whatever it is, and you go, well, that's going to give me the information I need, so I'm going to click on that and watch that. That's how it works.
So towards the end now, is there any sort of like question or like, is there anything else that, because we spoke a lot about a lot of things and I found them very useful and very interesting and definitely learned a lot from this conversation. Is there anything that you feel like you wanted to mention or you think it would be important to mention it that you haven't
I think just generally because we have covered a lot and this is like 1% of marketing, and I think that's I think that is something important to say, is that it's so big, so vast, and there's so much information. There's so many people telling you, you need to do this, you need to focus on this, you need to look at conversion rate optimization, you need to do complicated funnels, all these things. And it can frighten you, it can overwhelm you. Even as someone who's a marketer who knows a lot of this stuff, I don't know everything. And when I'm struggling with something or something's not working that I'm doing with a client, I'm like vulnerable, susceptible to those things as well, because it's marketing, right? It's like, you're not doing this thing, you need to do this, and straight away you go, oh. So I think a key message would be switch it all off and just focus on small steps and build up one thing at a time and just experiment, and go back to how I kind of started with simplifying marketing is just relationship building. It's trying to reach the right people with those right messages and give them that specific value, like linked to their goals. What are they trying to do? What do they need to know? And just thinking it more organically, not, oh, it's marketing, it's all these processes, it's all these systems, it's all these things. Because especially if you're on your own or you're like with your podcast, you're trying to do something in addition to job, life, all the other things going on. It's too much. And there's so much information, there's so much complexity. The only answer, the only solution is to start small, start simple, and don't think of it as marketing, just think of it as relationship building. I think that would be like the key thing to come back to after everything we've been through, because I wouldn't want you or anyone to kind of like be overwhelmed by, God, like there's so much work.
Absolutely. Alex, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Before we finish off here, is there how can if people, obviously you said you help founders and businesses with their marketing. Is there anything, how can people find you? How can people connect with you?
Yeah, well, LinkedIn, yeah. We can put that in right on the notes. Yeah, I do dip in, dip out, and then
what's your name on LinkedIn so people can
Alex Whitty, so it's Whitty. And then I've been busy start of this year, but yeah, like you, want to do more face-to-face networking things as well. So, but yeah, I always want to connect with good people. Again, another reason for doing this is just it's interesting, right? It's something new and different. So,
great stuff. That is yeah, absolutely. I connect with new people. I've been, honestly, I think a while ago, before I started the podcast, I was like, that was the reason why I wanted to start a podcast, like connect with more people. And at the end, I still don't go to networking events, and sort of like party I sort of like described to you in those messages the other day. That was like my sort of like, this is my attempt at like creating, because what I don't like about networking events is that they're big, they're boring, you get stuck in conversations. There's nothing special about them.
Yeah.
And it just so happened that recently I read this cool book that one of my friends recommended to me, and it's basically a playbook of how to organize these parties, and it worked quite successfully, because I organized the first time around in February and people absolutely loved it, and I want to do more of that. Nice. Yeah, hopefully, well, you can't come to another one because you're going away, but anyways, I'm waffling here. I've got something to give to you. I give this to everyone who comes to the podcast.
Yeah.
This is my favorite chocolate bar.
Dare. I like it.
And it's got a very short story behind it. You know, when you were a kid and you used to have a chocolate bar. In my case, I would have a chocolate bar and I would take the first bite and I would think, this does not have enough chocolate.
Yeah.
Regardless, I would still eat it. Fast forward to high school, someone comes up to me and says, hey, this is like a very good chocolate bar. Have you tried it? I was like, no, can I have it? He was like, yeah, have it. And I take the first bite and oh my God, it's got so much chocolate in it. You'll think, I think this will be your new favorite chocolate bar.
Life-changing event. Can't wait for it.
Yeah.
Where'd you get it?
Okay, so up until literally 3 weeks ago, I would be able to get it from Romania. My family would come down like maybe once a year and like I would tell them, can you bring me like 20 or 30? And they would do that. Or when I would go back to Romania, I would buy 30 and come back with them. Second option was, up until now, I was able to buy it also from a very small shop with a very shitty website. But nonetheless, the website works.
Yeah.
From Birmingham.
Right, wow.
But now, 3 weeks ago, I was able to find it in the international food market by the one across from Spoons.
Yeah, I know.
And I was so happy when I found it. I was like, no, I don't have to order it anymore. I can just walk in and get like...
Is that dangerous though? You're just going to go in every day and...
No, because when I went, I was like, I bought 20 on the spot. I was like, have them. Funny enough, the lady at the counter, she said to me, no, we've always had them. I was like, bullshit. I come in here every 3 months checking.
There you go. Awesome. I'll give you my feedback. I'll give you a testimonial on the chocolate bar.
Nice. Alex, thank you so much.
Brilliant. It's been a pleasure. Thank you. Really enjoyed it. Cheers, Luca.